Hello, and welcome to another edition of TETFund, The Paradigm Shift. I am Stanley Bentu. In just a couple of days, Professor Suleiman Elias Bogoro's first term of 5 years as the Executive Secretary of TETFund ends on the 18th of March, 2022. He will be saying goodbye to an agency that he has served with distinction, making him a very popular figure in the Nigerian university system. Architect Sonny Echono will receive the baton from Professor Bogoro to continue the race to improve public tertiary education in Nigeria. This edition of the show is a valedictory episode which takes a look back at the Bogoro years and the impact that he has made during his years of service. Indeed, he's been a shining example of all that a chief executive officer should be. Over the past year, the Paradigm Shift has carefully followed the activities of TETFund under the leadership of Professor Bogoro. Let's have a listen to what university vice chancellors, rectors, and provosts of colleges of education had to say about him.
Always accessible, always ready to help. I mean, the executive secretary of TETFund, the best human being in the world, exceptionally accessible. Even if you don't come, he goes. I mean, if you don't go, he comes, to look at what is happening and to say, look, let's work together. And research especially has been one of his things, and is supporting us.
Liberal Executive Secretary of TETFund, Professor Bogoro, you can walk into his office anytime. Yeah. You can walk into his office anytime. You can even call him and he will answer you. So, for me personally, I have a good relationship with him. In fact, sometimes I blame myself for not taking advantage of this relationship so well. I know they are precious on him and things like that. But on few occasions that I went there, has given me opportunity, listening to me and assured me of the assistance. And that is on his own part. The other part, these are the other people, whether Zona or something like that, and they give it at and when due.
Somebody who is really concerned with following the due process and then ensuring that these projects are completed based on specification. And what I have observed is that once you respect the regulations, you will be a friend of TETFund, and they will continuously support you. I want to use this opportunity to express my profound appreciation to the leadership of TETFund. I want to appreciate the Executive Secretary, Professor Suleiman Bogoro, and all his management team for the excellent work that they are doing in the Nigerian university system.
Now, if you've ever met Professor Bogoro, the first thing that strikes you is how intensely focused and decisive that he is as a leader. But who is the man? Where did he come from? How did he get to where he is? This next report paints a portrait of the outgoing TETFund boss. Suleiman Elias Bogoro was born on the 6th of June, 1958, hailing from Gwaranga in Bogoro local government area of Bauchi State. He studied and obtained his first school-leaving certificate in 1971, WASC in 1976, and a BSc in agriculture in 1981 from the Mwari Transferred Primary School, the Boys Secondary School Gindri in present Plateau State, and the University of Maiduguri, respectively. As a passionate academic, he later earned a PhD in animal science from the Abubakar Tafawa Balewa University, with composite research and bench work similarly divided among ATBU, the Rowett Research Institute, Aberdeen, Scotland, and the Department of Clinical Veterinary Medicine, University of Cambridge, United Kingdom. Suleiman Elias Bogoro became a professor in 2003. He is a prolific researcher with numerous publications. in fact, over 65 of them in international and local journals and other academic platforms, with 2 patents being evaluated. First, he innovated a rumen fermentation model and has developed a modified reentrant rumen cannulation surgical technique for better understanding and tooling of rumen metabolism for bulls and rams. Secondly, through his doctoral research work, he improved on the technology of the crew process, a method of storing sorghum and other local crop straws, whereby he successfully reduced the anaerobic fermentation gestation period from 3 weeks to less than 2 weeks, yet retaining the high nutrient contents of the straw for the feeding of ruminants for beef, dairy, or other production purposes in a cattle ranch. In April of 2014, former President Goodluck Jonathan appointed Professor Suleiman Elias Bogoro as the Executive Secretary of TETFund. This choice would prove to be a significant moment in the history of TETFund, as it signaled the birth of a paradigm shift for the agency. Professor Bogoro, an agriculturist, innovator, and seasoned administrator, led TETFund in the first instance from 2014 to 2016, in which time he fought uncompromisingly against entrenched excesses. This led to an attempt to scuttle his work when the system couldn't cope with his scrupulous stance.
Right, that was more of the defining line of the baseless allegations against me. There were 5 allegations based on what the Senate, the 8th Senate, communicated to me at that time. And of the 5, the most striking, invariably, was the so-called missing 200 billion naira that those that sponsored, wrote, or funded, whichever way you want to call it, the allegations wanted Nigerians to believe. For me, when I was invited, it was a high-profile allegation because it was laid on the floor of the Senate on the day that the Senate is sitting live. So friends all over the world called me and said, "What are we hearing?" I told them, calm down. They refused to believe it until when eventually I appeared before the Senate. And I was now to formally defend those allegations. And when I came, of course, they had read my response. So a lot of tension had been doused, I can assure you, because it was very clear that all the 5 allegations were baseless, particularly the 200. One, there was never 200 billion missing in TETFund. A figure of 273.9 billion was contentiously a central investigation matter. But the facts were very clear to me as the executive secretary then. I knew the facts were clear. I came and met that 273.9 billion, taken about 6 months, between 6 to 9 months before I became ES. So I had nothing to do with it. But here they were, the allegation were that I was the one that took the money.
But you were able to clear yourself.
Well, thank God we did, because it was very easy. Like I said, that money was taken out. That money was taken out from higher authorities to settle the ASU. To settle ASU agreement of 2013. And I was appointed 2014. I had written earlier asking for refund of that money, and so it was ridiculous for somebody to suggest. When I wrote and I said somebody somewhere our money was taken away, then I just read somewhere they're saying I was the thief. So it was as bad as that. But thank God, by the time we finished the public hearing, all the senators picked their microphone and said we were misled. And I can assure you there were other investigations, because it's a very sensitive matter. There were other investigations, after I was disengaged, February 2016. I requested that I don't mind if there is investigation. And Mr. President was so kind to proceed with that.
He received vindication 3 years later via a reinstatement by President Muhammadu Buhari in January of 2019. His return was greeted with tumultuous applause from TETFund staff and backed by the Minister of Education, Malam Adamu. And he began the implementation of an elaborate strategy to institutionalize research and development in Nigeria's tertiary institutions. Without lifting his foot from the throttle of infrastructure interventions, Professor Bogoro restarted his mission to make TETFund a dynamic facilitator for translating research into innovations and strategies for policy and national economic development by creating the agency's pioneer Department of Research and Development / Centers of Excellence. No doubt, Professor Suleiman Elias Bogoro's most enduring legacy as Executive Secretary of TETFund is his leadership drive towards research and development. Within the context of TETFund's mandate, Professor Bogoro galvanized the agency towards content development and teaching new knowledge required in the 21st century.
That is the year, of course, I was barely a month or two in office as Executive Secretary of TETFund, 2014. When this happened. And for me, I reflected over what I know obtains, for instance, in the university system where I operated, and I still operate anyway, as a professor. And I realized that we have a major problem. Major problem being we are not prioritizing research enough. We tend to have been emphasizing teaching, of course, at the expense of research. And I insist that one shapes, defines, and strengthens the other. Definitely it is research that shapes, strengthens, and defines teaching. Being that the academia was much less concerned about establishing partnership, reaching out to industry. And I thought that was patently wrong. And that is why I made a case first in TETFund. How do we proceed? The strategy to institutional R&D was, TETFund does not have a department for R&D. Why don't we have it? And I said, to do that, let us tie it to centers of excellence. That is the issue of quality. Quality of segments, of parts of activities in a university or anywhere else. That's what a center of excellence is. So we decided let there be, I made a case of the 6-point pillar articulated. I requested for creation of R&D and centers of excellence department. And thank God, as we talk today, it came to be.
Under the watchful eyes of Professor Bogoro, TETFund implemented a paradigm shift, which began in 2015 at a time when its intervention in critical physical infrastructure needs of the public tertiary institutions in Nigeria reached a critical threshold. The rationale for the shift was drawn from some crucial components of President Muhammadu Buhari's Executive Order No. 5 to attain a greater Nigeria. The Department of Research and Development / Centers of Excellence presently manages the biggest research fund portfolio in the country within the framework of the National Research Fund. The NRF funding was increased from an initial 3 billion naira to 7.5 billion naira in 2020, increasing the number of beneficiaries by 56% year on year from 2019 to 2020. In effect, 50% increase in funding has resulted in 56% increment in value. TETFund responded, targeting COVID-19 at a time when it brought the global economy to a standstill. Palliatives were donated by TETFund to help cushion the sudden effects of the pandemic in different communities across the 6 geopolitical zones of the country. 6 research and development efforts were aimed at drug discovery and development of candidate therapeutic treatments, diagnostic tools, ventilators, and repurposing of drugs to fight COVID-19. Several institutions, including the National Food and Drug Administration and Control, that's NAFDAC, the University of Ibadan, the Usman Danfodio University Kano, the University of Jos, the Nnamdi Azikiwe University, and Kaduna Polytechnic. Several others were funded by TETFund to undergo COVID-19 research work. During the Bogoro years, TETFund responded to the recalcitrant national security challenges of Nigeria by engaging the armed forces. Through the Defense Research and Development Bureau, as well as other institutions, TETFund invested in developing new technologies like the unmanned aerial vehicle to combat terrorism. By 2021, TETFund achieved the establishment of 24 new centers of excellence, 4 in each geopolitical zone, drawn from universities, polytechnics, and colleges of education. Mobilized with the sum of 1 billion naira each, they have since hit the ground running in line with global standards.
With regards to the centers of excellence, remember we did say that if our universities are to play a meaningful role in the emergence of knowledge economy, then the universities themselves have to be centers of excellence. And we also did say that under 2020, Mr. President has graciously approved the sum of 12 billion naira for the establishment of 12 centers of excellence across the country. I'm happy to say that the Executive Secretary has started to implement this directive of Mr. President. All the 12 centers now have been given their allocation letters. Guidelines for the establishment and management of these funds have been approved by the Board of Trustees.
The TETFund Research and Development Standing Committee was inaugurated in September 2020 with a think tank of 165 Nigerian experts drawn from the government, the academia, and industry. They were divided into 13 thematic groups based on the priority sectors of the economy to stimulate catalytic responses to our national challenges. The strategic focus of the RDSC include to facilitate the institutionalization of R&D in Nigeria in all spheres of national life, improved ranking of Nigeria's tertiary institutions, promotion of global competitiveness of Nigeria's products and services through value addition and capacity strengthening for skills in development and management of knowledge economy.
In February, you could recollect that the last general meeting was held where reports were adopted. So across the 13 thematic groups, we concluded on the first phase of the assignment, while the members have actually worked together for 6 intensive months. So to make sure that they concretize their report, and those are technical reports that came from the 13 thematic groups that we have. Remember, I mentioned that these 13 thematic groups constitute about 85% of the Nigerian GDP as of today. So what we have there was so fantastic, and we cannot be talking about research without the crop of people that are members of RDSC, including the technical coordination team, actually performing research themselves. So what do I mean by this? We've done a lot of brainstorming session, think tanking session, but at a point we need to actually go on feed. So we are on feed for 3 weeks, and I need to emphasize this because Nigerians need to appreciate the volume of work that went into the report that I'm talking about.
With 36 reports, all set to be implemented, TETFund worked through a drafting committee on a draft bill to be presented by the President to the National Assembly for the establishment of the National Research and Development Foundation. Such was the commitment of Professor Bogoro to research and development that in 2021, the Science Granting Council's initiative in Sub-Saharan Africa announced that TETFund was selected to join the initiative to advance research excellence in sub-Saharan Africa. Since 2015, the SGCI has been jointly funded by the United Kingdom's Foreign Commonwealth Development Office, FCDO, Canada's International Development Research Centre, IDRC, and South Africa's National Research Foundation. Others are the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency, SIDA, and the German Research Foundation, DFG. The outgoing Executive Secretary of TETFund said the SGCI will open a new window of opportunity that will serve as a fulcrum of achieving Nigeria's goal, and that is the transition to a knowledge economy in the 21st century. In his personal life, Professor Bogoro is happily married to Honorable Justice Yelim Bogoro of the Federal High Court. The couple is blessed with 3 children, Barrister Dadin, Deborah, and Esther. His service to TETFund and tertiary education in Nigeria will never be forgotten. Even as the sun sets on one era, another immediately begins. The bittersweet nostalgia of the outgoing is blended with the curiosity and excitement of the incoming. So, in this next report, we will be taking a sneak peek at what lies in store for TETFund in the future. President Muhammadu Buhari has entrusted the intervention agency to the hands of architect Sonny Echono for the next 5 years. Now, I'm sure that there will be so much to come from him in the near future. But for now, let's learn a little bit about the new TETFund boss.
Recently, President Muhammadu Buhari approved the appointment of architect Sonny Echono as the new Executive Secretary of TETFund. Architect Echono is the immediate past Permanent Secretary of the Federal Ministry of Education and a member of the TETFund Board of Trustees, among other important national assignments. He is the man who will take over from Professor Suleiman Elias Bogoro, whose 5-year tenure will end on the 18th of March 2022. A seasoned administrator, Architect Echono spent 7 years as Permanent Secretary in various ministries. 4 years of those were spent in the Ministry of Education. Architect Echono is an accomplished technocrat who is expected to bring a diverse wealth of experience in infrastructure, business administration, procurement management, ICT, and education to the job. An exciting future awaits the intervention agency as it begins a new journey under architect Sonny Echono.
Now, there is a saying that the lives of great men all remind us that we can make our own lives sublime. And when they move on, they leave behind for us footprints on the sands of time. Now, there is no doubt that Professor Suleiman Elias Bogoro is moving on to greater adventures. So this is a new beginning for him as well. His years at TETFund will never be forgotten, and his achievements will no doubt stand the test of time. There are seeds that he has planted today, of which Nigeria will enjoy the fruits of in many years to come. Thank you, Professor Bogoro. And that is the Paradigm Shift. Join us again on the next edition of the program. Until then, thank you for stopping by. Good night.